The Senate will come back to order. Senate will come back to order. I recognize the senator from the 31st for a motion.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I ask that for unanimous consent that Senate Bill 420 be lifted from the table.
Senator has asked that Senate Bill 420 be taken off the table. Is there objection? No objection. Secretary, read the.
Senate Bill 420, a bill by Senator Anna Vitarte of the 31st and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 2 of the OCGA relating to general provisions relative to agriculture so as to prohibit the acquisition of possessory interests in certain land by certain foreign persons and entities and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Cowser of the 46th District Chairman. The Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 420, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 2 of the OCGA relating to general provisions relative to agriculture so as to prohibit the acquisition of possessory interests in certain land by certain foreign persons and entities and for other purposes. Senator Anna Vitarte of the 31st and others offer the following amendment to amend the Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities substitute to Senate Bill 420 by inserting or land within a 25-mile radius of any military base, military installation, or military airport after agricultural land, each time such phrase appears and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from 31st.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon. Senate Bill 420 is a bill dealing with non-resident alien ownership of agricultural land. A little bit of history about this bill. I think we're raising it in concern to the issues that we're finding from overseas and the global perspective of the Communist Party of China buying land in Georgia. First, I want to thank the chairman of the Agriculture Committee, the senator from the 8th, for his help and support on this bill. Also, the chairman of Regulated Industries, the senator from the 46th, also our agricultural commissioner for his tireless efforts raising awareness to this issue. Senate Bill 420 prohibits non-resident aliens from directly or indirectly acquiring any possessory interest in ag land or within a 25-mile radius of a military base, installation, or airport. Non-resident aliens can acquire a possessory interest in ag land in certain circumstances, including by inheritance, collection of debts, or enforcement of liens. However, any interest acquired through the collection of debts or enforcement of lien must be deposed within a 2-year acquisition. This bill, in terms of the enforcement, will be enforced by the Attorney General's office and shall become effective upon July 21st, 2024. Mr. President, I will yield if there are any questions with this bill. Amendment number 1 is just cleanup language. There's a couple parts of the bill where it speaks to ag land or the 25-mile radius, and it's inconsistent, so this cleans up that language to make sure it's consistent throughout the entire bill. It's a friendly amendment. I'll yield if there's any questions.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for favorable consideration of Senate Bill 420.
Does any senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Senator from the 40, for what purpose do you rise? Senator from the 40.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to excuse the senator from the 44th.
Without objection, senator from the 44th excused. Senator from the 7th. Would you like to speak to the bill? Okay, senator from the 7th. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition against Senate Bill 420. This bill provides no real national security benefit, but does threaten the safety and security of Asian Americans, immigrants from Asia, and other immigrants. This bill does not target countries or regimes. Rather, it targets individuals based on their nation of origin. Questioning people's loyalty, trustworthiness, and dangerousness based on their country of origin is offensive and xenophobic. This bill perpetuates the shameful legacies of the Chinese Exclusion Act, McCarthyism, and anti-Asian land laws of the 1920s. Also, this bill risks serious challenges. This bill violates the Fair Housing Act, the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, and the Supremacy Clause. A federal court judge recently granted plaintiffs on injunction against a similar bill in Florida, claiming the law violates fair housing and the Equal Protection Clause against discrimination. It is irresponsible for Georgia lawmakers to pass this bill and test its constitutionality after the fact. Also, this bill creates an unfriendly and risky business climate for international investment. The list of designated countries can change depending on the political climate. Therefore, people and businesses from any country would think twice before moving to and investing in Georgia. And lastly, this bill goes against basic American rights and ideals. This bill criminalizes people not because of anything they have done wrong, but because of their country of origin and their immigration status. And the bill could make buying a piece of property a felony with monetary penalties. So, for all these reasons, I'm voting no against this bill, and I urge my colleagues to also vote no. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Senator has yielded. Recognize Senator from the 17th. Speak to the measure. You waive. Recognize Senator from the 46th. Speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to clear up a couple things. This bill came through the Regulated Industries Committee, and we paid very close attention to it, had a very thorough hearing, and we heard from realtors that made some of the same arguments you just heard from the senator from the 6th. In response to that, we modified the bill. We came up with a committee substitute, and just to let you know, this only deals with agricultural land or land within 25 miles of a military base. Does not otherwise deal with residential properties at all that are covered by the Federal Housing Act. But just to bend over backwards and make sure that we didn't violate that, the very last lines of this bill, 80 through 82, make it clear. In the event that the application of any provision of this code section to a particular transaction, talking about a sale of property, is found to be preempted by federal law, any such provision shall not apply to such transaction. So we are making very certain that we do not violate the Fair Housing Act. If any application of this does, that application will be void. So that is not a problem. This does not discriminate against people based on their national origin. If you're a citizen of the United States or you are here legally as a resident alien, we don't care where you're born or where you're from. This doesn't apply to you. It's only for folks that are here illegally and from communist countries, on not just any Asian countries. The countries are listed by the United States Commerce Department as foreign adversaries, our enemies. It's Russia, Iran, North Korea, Communist Party of China, and I think Venezuela's the other one. It is not picking on anybody based on what their heritage is at all. It's if you're a citizen of one of those countries, acting as an agent for one of those, and in our country illegally purchasing up the farmland and land near our military bases from a country that is a threat to the United States. So relax. This is not xenophobic. It is not, y'all get that, Senate Press? Relax. It is not going to be anything in violation of federal law, and it is not with any discriminatory intent against anybody based on their national origin. Only if it's somebody that is a non-resident alien that's not legally here. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Senator has yielded. Would any other member like to speak for or against the bill? Hearing none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Hearing none. We have one amendment authored by the senator from the 31st, who is the author on the underlying bill. Is there objection to the amendment? Would you like to close debate, Senator? I think you already indicated you wanted to. Without objection, Amendment 1 is adopted. Question is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Hearing none, committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to report a committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none, and the reported committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. By all those in favor will vote yea. All those opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the 31st, you.
Mr. President, is it not true that the senator from the 21st is very passionate about this issue and wants to stop China from buying ag land in Georgia?
He voted for it, Senator. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 41 and the nays are 11. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Recognize the senator from the 23rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent to remove SB 496 off the table.
Senator from the 23rd has requested that 496 be removed from the table. Is there objection? Objection. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 496, a bill by Senator Burns of the 23rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the OCGA relating to general provisions relative to ad valorem taxation of property, so as to provide for extension of preferential assessment periods for certain historic properties and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Economic Development and Tourism recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Beach of the 21st District Chairman. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Recognize the senator from the 23rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I bring you SB 496. This is an economic development bill which would allow, but not require, local jurisdictions to extend the preferential tax assessment for historic rehabilitated properties from 9 years up to as many as 12 additional years. If there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Question is, all those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 47, the nays are 6. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Recognize the senator from the 45th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to have SB 508 risen from the table.
Senator from the 45th is requested Senate Bill 508 to be taken off the table. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 508, a bill by Senator Dixon of the 45th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 15 of the OCGA relating to courts so as to provide for duties of the administrative office of the courts relative to accessibility of certain personal information of state and federal judges, justices, and spouses thereof, and for other purposes.
Is there objection? Without objection, recognize the senator from the 45th. Speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate colleagues, I'm happy to bring SB 508 before you today. This is a good bill that will help protect our state and federal judges, justices, and their spouses. What it does, it creates or it adds to the duties of the administrative office of the courts to establish and maintain a database, training, and sharing of information for the purpose of restricting access to certain personal material of federal judges, state judges, justices, and their spouses. For example, their address and their phone numbers. But with that, Mr. President, we'll yield well if there's no questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51 and the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. All right, recognize the senator from the 6th for a motion.
Mr. President, I move to take SB 469 off of the table.
Senator has moved to remove SB 469 from the table. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 469, a bill by Senator Estevez of the 6th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 11 of Chapter 3 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to the Georgia Higher Education Savings Plan and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Higher Education recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Hickman of the 4th District Chairman. Additionally, Senator Burns of the 28th and others offered the following amendment to amend Senate Bill 469 by replacing increase with revise on line 2, by replacing $450,000 with a reasonable maximum amount as determined by the board based on current and anticipated education expenses on line 19. That completes the order, Mr. President.
All right, recognize Senator. Oh, is there objection? Is there objection for the bill coming off the table? Without objection, recognize Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I present to you, colleagues, SB 469. It is a simple bill that increases the maximum amounts families can have in a 529 plan. These plans can be used to pay for college expenses, both on campus and off campus, and can also be used to pay for K through 12 education and related expenses. Georgia's 529 plan was created in 2001, and the limit of $235,000 was set at that time and has not been increased since. As a result, Georgia has one of the lowest limits. In fact, it's one of 2 states with the lowest limit, us and Mississippi, while all the other states have increased their limits to $500,000 or more. This proposal originally set the limit at $450,000, but in talking with the director of the plan, Mitch Seaball, we have submitted an amendment that would allow the board of the 529 plan to increase the maximum amount over time to tie it to the highest cost institution, which in this state is Emory University. So it's a pretty simple bill that will allow our families to save in a smart way for education expenses all across the state. With that, I'll entertain any questions.
You do have a couple questions, Senator. I recognize the senator from the 56.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does Senator yield?
Yes, to my good
Senator,
friend
is
from
this
56.
your first bill?
This is not. And in fact, my first bill was vetoed by our governor. Yeah. So thanks for bringing up those bad memories.
The Senator
from
yield for a
last year.
series of questions then.
Yes.
Senator, was your first bill almost the same exact language?
No, but my first bill also did something on a bipartisan basis that advanced the ball for Georgians all across the state.
So, Senator, you feel comfortable that this bill is actually going to make it over the goal line and the governor's going to sign it for you?
Nothing is 100% in this building, but I am very, very confident.
All right, good luck.
Recognize the senator from the 27th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield
Absolutely.
for maybe a couple questions? I think you said this passed in 2001 and it was $235,000. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is it not true that $235,000, just taking straight CPI, today is $410,000? And of course, college education has far outstripped typical inflation. So essentially what you're doing is recognizing the original intent and value of these 529 plans and restoring them to today's dollars. Is that not true?
That's absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator from the 17th.
Does Senator yield?
For my good friend from 17.
Are you wearing the governor's pin there on your jacket today?
I am not, but if that will prevent a veto, I will consider it.
Is it true that from time to time you wear the governor's pin when you come to into this chamber?
Senator, I cannot confirm that at this time.
All right, you don't have any more questions? No more
I will
questions,
yield
sir?
the well. Thank you.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. We have the amendment authored by the senator from the 6th. Is there objection to the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. You know, I remember the 529 bill. The last person I knew to touch a 529 bill in this chamber was a senator from the 6th, a guy named Hunter Hill. He didn't get many Democratic votes that day, so I'm going to be interested to see how this vote goes, Senator. So, but y'all represent the same district there. So, is there objection to agreeing to the report of committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill as amended. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. Senator from the 20th, for what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Is that the same craft beer hill that you're referring to?
He did a lot of things. He was a good one. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54 and the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed as amended. I knew this body was getting more conservative in here, I tell you what. They're coming around, y'all. All right, recognize the senator from the 50th for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we move Senate Bill 493 from the table.
The senators move that we take 493, Senate Bill 493 off the table. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 493, a bill by Senator Hatchett of the 50th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 1 of Title 42 of the OCGA relating to the Sexual Offender Risk Review Board, so as to provide for additional penalties for registered sexual offenders convicted of photographing a minor without the consent of the minor's parent and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Strickland of the 17th District Chairman. The Senate Committee on Judiciary offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 493. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 1 of Title 42 of the OCGA relating to the Sexual Offender Risk Review Board, so to provide for additional penalties for registered sexual offenders convicted of photographing a minor without the consent of the minor's parent and not for other purposes. Senator McLaurin of the 14th offers the following Amendment 1 to amend Senate Bill 493 by adding particular before person on line 50 and or photograph, observe, follow, or contact any person in a way that violates the person's reasonable expectation of privacy after consent on line 51 and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to Senator from the 50's motion? Hearing none, I recognize Senator from the 50 to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to bring you Senate Bill 493. What this bill seeks to address is the issue that I think we'll continue to see where technology has outpaced our criminal code. What this bill does is it puts restrictions on the use of drones, which are unmanned aircrafts, by members of, or people who are on the sex offender registry. It would prevent or make it a criminal act for someone on the sex offender registry to use a drone to take a picture of a minor or an adult without their consent. I believe that this is a good bill for the people of the state of Georgia. It's protecting our vulnerable citizens, and what we've seen across the country is sex offenders now are starting to use drones to take pictures of people without their consent, because there's a anonymity with the drone where you don't know who's flying it, who has it, and where the drone is going. With the advancement of technology that we're seeing, I believe this is important, and I'd be happy to yield for any questions. And I want to thank my colleague from the 14th who came to me with an amendment with his background in the legal field, just crafting this to make it a little bit better piece of legislation and without circumventing the intent of the bill.
You do have one question, Senator. I recognize the senator from the 2nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. To my good friend, Senator from the 50th, do you yield?
I do.
Senator, with this bill and the amendment, it is safe to say that I can travel down I-16 proudly with this bill in hand.
The senator knows of what he speaks.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you. I yield the well.
Senator from the 14th, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. Very briefly, really appreciate the senator from the 50th's efforts to work with us to clarify the language. I rise in support of the bill. We'll be glad to support it. The language mostly just clarifies that the use of the drones won't run into any sort of First Amendment issues by making the violation specific to looking for a particular person to try to harass and stalk them, or any sort of use of a drone that violates somebody's privacy, like peeping. And so that's the intent of legislation that the senator from the 50th had. We tightened that up, and we're going to be proud to support it today. I'll yield for any questions.
You have no questions.
Okay,
Senator.
thank you, Mr. President.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Is there any objection to the question being called? Chair hearing none. The question is on the amendment, Amendment 1, authored by the senator from the 14th. Is there objection to the amendment? Hearing none, the amendment is added. Question is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Hearing none, the committee substitute as amended is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. Report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor will signify by saying, voting yes. All those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock this machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53 and the nays are 1. This bill having received requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Recognize the senator from 11th for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we bring Senate Bill 495 off the table.
Senators moved that 495 come off the table. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 495, A bill by Senator Watson of the 11th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 312A18 of the OCGA relating to the low THC oil patient registry so as to provide for the term of validity of a registration card and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Health and Human Services recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Watson of the 1st District Chairman. The Health and Human Services Committee offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 495, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 312A18 of the OCGA relating to the low THC oil patient registry and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, I recognize the senator from the 11th to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is Senate Bill 495. This is dealing with our THC oil patient registry. We have about 15,000 Georgians that are on this registry. Currently, to receive your registration card, you have to go to your local health department and pick it up in person. So what we're doing in this bill is we're allowing the Department of Public Health to send out those registration cards by certified mail. That way, if they're in a nursing home or elderly or do not have transportation, they can get the registration card and get this medicine that they need. That's what the bill does, Mr. President. I'd be glad to take any questions if there are any.
You do have a couple of questions, Senator. Recognize the senator from 46.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield?
Yes, sir.
On lines 24 and 25 of your bill, it says these cards that are issued pursuant to this code section shall be valid for 5 years. What's the current length of the validity of a card?
5 years.
Okay. And then further yield?
Yes, sir.
And then it says, so long as the individual or caregiver remains eligible for receipt of the card based on their continued diagnosis, of their condition. How are people to know what their medical condition is? I mean, what if I had, PTSD or whatever we got covered and it was cured within that 5-year period? How does the registry know that I'm no longer eligible to buy, these THC products?
Well, in order to get the card, it first has to, there's a waiver that's signed. My understanding, there's a waiver that's signed by the patient and by that patient's physician that approves the certification and the reasons that they need the card, because they have to fall into that list of illnesses that we have. So if something changes in between there, I'm not sure how that is handled with the department, but that could still be the case today if they pick it up in person. There's still could be a question of whether, what something happens to them and they picked it up in person today, but something happens to them next year, the card is still out there.
Senator, further yield. So I guess that's my problem, is how would we know if a person's been cured or is no longer in suffering? They got a 5-year card, they can keep buying the dope without any reporting requirement. I just wondered if that's somewhere else in the law or rules or regs, but we'll look it up.
Yeah, I couldn't answer that, but appreciate the question.
Recognize the senator from the 53rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will Senator Yield?
Yes, sir.
I had a similar question along the same lines on 24, 25. It was to my understanding there wasn't a 5-year requirement already, and this is new language being added to the law, is this 5 years. And the conditions that we do allow low THC oil, to me, I was thinking most of these were kind of terminally ill diseases anyway, and is it an extra burden on a patient to have to go in and do this bureaucracy to maintain a license? So why is that 5 years a requirement?
The 5 years, I do not know. The illnesses are terminal in some situations. We just want to make sure that they get the medicine that they need, whether it's a 5-year card or a 1-year card. I don't know that a timeline really matters if they need it for an illness. The problem that we have is a lot of people cannot access the card at all, whether it be that they live in a nursing home or they're so elderly that they cannot drive, or they have an illness that prevents them from driving, and then not all of our public health departments are even issuing these cards. There's a list online, and if you'll count the health departments, not every single health department is listed. So we have people that can't even go to their local health department to pick up the card. So we're just trying to get more access to help more people.
You got one question, or you can yield the well, whichever one you want.
I'll take one more, and then I'll yield the well.
Recognize Senator from the 29th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Gill.
Yes, sir.
Senator, to reference the aforementioned dope that my colleague mentioned, is it not true that the vast majority of individuals on this registry are on there claiming issues related to PTSD?
They could be.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. President, I yield the well.
Senator has yielded. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor, vote yea. All those opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51, the nays are 3. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Recognize Senator from the 13th for a motion.
Mr. President, I ask that Senate Resolution 82 be lifted from the table.
Senators move that Senate Resolution 82 be taken off the table. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Resolution 82, a resolution by Senator Summers of the 13th and others, a resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution so as to authorize the tax commissioner, subject to local governing authority approval, to waive certain delinquent ad valorem property taxes and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Banking and Financial Institutions recommends that this do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Summers of the 13th District Chairman. The Banking and Financial Institutions Committee offers the following substitute to Senate Resolution 82. A resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution so as to authorize the tax commissioner, subject to local governing authority approval, to waive certain delinquent ad valorem property taxes and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection? Hearing none, recognize Senator from the 13th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hey, colleagues, here we have Senate Resolution 82. This Senate resolution has been vetted in all 159 counties and a ton of cities across Georgia. This is necessary legislation to allow cities and counties to take delinquent property that taxes haven't been paid on it for years and allow them to address each individual property as it comes up to put this property back on the market at a price that they can either waive all taxes, penalties, and fees. They have the right now to waive interest and penalties, but they don't have the right to waive the underlying delinquent taxes. And this property could go back on people could buy it, could go back on the taxes and become tax-producing property again. We have it in here where you can't game the system. If someone didn't pay their tax and tried to buy the property back, they cannot get the deduction. If they're caught getting the deduction, they would owe 20% to the property back. And if anybody does it in their family and tries to buy it for them, they have to pay the full amount. So we've covered every angle to try to keep the system from being gamed. And the cities and the counties would make individual decisions for each property, and they would waive it, and it would also include school. Any question, Mr. President? I'll yield the well.
You do have one question, Senator.
Yes, sir.
Recognize the senator from the 5th.
Senator, that's a good resolution, but I'm looking at the list. Looks like your list was at the very last. Do you have any suggestion for some of us how to move a bill faster?
If you vote for this bill, let me get settled down. I'll come over and talk to you.
That'll work.
Thank you, sir. Ask for a green vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yep. Senators yielded. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. Previous question is ordered. Question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the resolution? Chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, the main question is ordered. Question is on the adoption of resolution by substitute. All those in favor of the resolution vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the adoption of the resolution by substitute, the yeas are 53 and the nays are 0. This resolution, having received the requisite 2/3 constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. I recognize the senator from the 2nd for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to lift Senate Bill 534 from the table.
Senator has asked that 534 be taken from the table. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 534, a bill by Senator Mallow of the 2nd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 15 of Chapter 1 of Title 10 of the OCGA relating to the Fair Business Practices Act of 1975, so as to provide that the failure of a marketplace innkeeper to provide a consumer with an itemized receipt detailing certain taxes and fees and further purposes. The Senate Committee on Economic Development and Tourism recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Beach of the 21st District Chairman. Senator Mallow and others offer the following Amendment 1 to amend Senate Bill 534 by inserting on line 20, this act shall become law on January 1, 2025. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection? Hearing none, I recognize the senator from the 2nd to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know we've got a long agenda after us, and I will do like any good Baptist preacher. I have 3 points, and I will be out of your way quickly. Mr. President, this is a very simple bill. This bill talks about a marketplace innkeeper providing a consumer with a detailed receipt VRBOs, Expedia, and those companies that you book online. This bill just simply requires them to list by line item the taxes and fees that you have paid separately, so that you know if you paid the state hotel motel fee, the state occupancy tax, or your local occupancy tax. If you are an Airbnb owner, this in no way creates a burden on you. The owner, Airbnb, will have to do this, and that's why the amendment is here. Airbnb has asked that we extend it till 2025 to give them the opportunity to update the software so that consumers can get detailed receipts, so you know exactly which taxes and fees you've paid. My colleague, the senator from the 4th, had an experience with this very same issue where he did not know what the tax or fee was until after he checked out. And so with that, Mr. President, I will ask for favorable consideration and yield the well. Thank you.
The senator has yielded. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of, on adoption on Amendment 1. Is there objection to adoption of Amendment 1? Without objection, Amendment 1 is adopted. Senators from the 43rd, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 34th.
From the 44th? 34th, okay. Without objection, the senator from the 34th is excused. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill as amended. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53, nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed as amended. Well, it looks like we got a very special guest back there in the back. Our Agricultural Commissioner, Tyler Harper, everybody. I'll tell you what. He and I served 10 years together. I've never seen him with a cowboy hat. He got one now, though. It was no, Tyler's my buddy now. He's my best friend. I've never had a better friend in this body than Tyler Harper, and he's doing a great job as Agriculture Commissioner. So thank you, Tyler, for all the good work you're doing, my friend. Senator from 51st, for what purpose you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
When I saw that gentleman standing back there with that tall black hat on, I thought he was John Dutton from Yellowstone.
Yeah,
He's
absolutely.
the livestock commissioner.
Hey, John Dutton just wish he had Tyler Harper's talents now. That's a Renaissance man right there. So, all right. Recognize the senator from the 36th. For what purpose you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that the stature of our agriculture commissioner continues to thrive and grow, particularly with his recent stellar appearance on the cover of the Forestry Association magazine?
Wow. I did not see that, Senator.
Oh, don't miss it. It's a keeper.
I did not see that.
Oh, yes, yes.
We gotta get a blown up copy. Can you get it autographed for us, Senator?
I'm gonna work on that.
All
I'll
right,
take that as
great.
my assignment. Thank you, sir.
That is fantastic. That is fantastic. All right, I recognize the senator from the 37th for a motion.
Mr. President, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to remove Senate Bill 180 from the table.
Senators ask that SB 180 be removed from the table. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 180, a bill by Senator Settler of the 37th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 50 of the OCGA relating to state government, so as to provide for the preservation of religious freedom and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Strickland of the 17th District Chairman. A minority report has been filed. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection? Hearing none, recognize the senator from the 37th to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, ladies and gentlemen of the state who are watching us today, appreciate the opportunity to bring before you today what should be a simple cleanup legal bill, Senate Bill 180, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Every Georgian should be free to worship and exercise their faith without unfair federal, state, or local government intrusion. The Georgia Religious Freedom Restoration Act protects ordinary people from unfair state and local government intrusion by exactly mirroring the bipartisan federal RFRA law that protects people from federal government intrusion. After the federal RFRA law was passed almost unanimously in 1993, the United States Supreme Court in 1997 ruled that the federal RFRA law only protected people from unfair federal government intrusion and would not protect people from unfair state or local government intrusion. Since then, 34 of 50 states have adopted their own state RFRA laws or seen their courts adopt state RFRA level protections by judicial ruling to protect people from overreach by state and local governments, just as they are by the federal government. In 1998, in the Illinois legislature, State Senator Barack Obama voted for the Illinois state RFRA law. In 2016, Georgia passed a state bill that included language dramatically different than what we have before us today, and was subsequently vetoed by Governor Nathan Deal. In 2017, our Attorney General confirmed that without a state RFRA law, Georgians do not have the religious protections from state and local governments that we have and enjoy from our federal government, and that state and local governments may infringe upon people's faith for any rational reason. In 2021, Montana and South Dakota became the 33rd and 34th state to enact RFRA that closely mirrored the federal language you see before you today. And in fact, since then, although not yet signed by the governor, last week, the Utah House of Representatives, by a vote of 69-0, passed a law very similar to what we have today. In fact, its religious protections are even slightly stronger than what you see before you today, because this bill mirrors the federal language. It was passed in the Utah Senate by a vote of 27-2. RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, Senate Bill 180, puts the First Amendment right to free exercise on the same level as our rights to freedom of speech, the press's rights of freedom of the press, or the rights of freedom of assembly, by creating a simple balancing test. All this bill does is it creates a balancing test to weigh a person's right to practice their faith against government's legitimate powers to perform its governmental functions. Under RFRA, before a government can force a person to violate their faith, it must first show a compelling government interest, and that interest is accomplished in the least restrictive means possible. What does this mean in real life? We could go on and on, but won't tonight. Our time is short. But I'll share two examples of how RFRA was used in meaningful ways to show both its benefits and its limits. In a public school in Texas, school officials mandated that a Native American kindergarten boy cut his traditionally styled hair as being too long and not in keeping with the school's policy for boys. Their parents sued and said it's not fair. They used the state RFRA law. And the courts used the state RFRA law and balanced the compelling government interest versus this family's religious right as a family living out their Native American faith and recognized the government does not have a compelling interest to tell boys they should cut their hair shorter than girls in their dress codes. RFRA worked by the compelling interest test. Interestingly enough, though, in Florida, a Muslim woman who did not want to remove her full face veil for a driver's license photo used the Florida state RFRA law and said, you can't make me remove my full face veil for a driver's license photo. The government, she brought a case in court, and the court said, no, there's a compelling governmental interest to make you remove your full face veil so that your full face can be shown in your driver's license. But the other part of the balancing test, the least restrictive means possible test, when that was applied, they reasoned, you know what, there's not a compelling interest to make a woman remove her face veil in a public place in front of a group of people, and they allowed her, using this test of least restrictive means possible, to have her driver's license photo taken by a female photographer in a private room. She still had to have her face on her driver's license carried with her, but the least restrictive means possible test did not demand she do that in an open room in front of a crowd of people, but that she could have her photo taken by a female photographer in a private room. That's exactly how this common sense balancing test works. It simply provides a tool, given the very difficult circumstances that are presented in balancing different interests in our court system, to weigh out the legitimate interest that government has versus the people's religious rights. That's it. That's what it does. It creates a balancing test. You're going to hear some discussion tonight, I'm afraid, that's going to talk about this being wildly overreaching and bringing about all these bad outcomes. Friends, what we have before us today is simply a balancing test that does not prejudge anything. Never has a RFRA statute been used to effectuate and back up invidious discrimination or the parade of horribles you're going to hear today. What we simply do is we give courts a balancing test to take on these very difficult competing interests so both interests can fit together in as full of a way as possible. In fact, as we talked about this last year, and as we've talked about this in the interviews we've taken, the RFRA law travels very well. One thing that was raised is, what is it going to mean for our states that have had, or parts of our state that have local ordinances, local civil rights ordinances? Well, that's a great question. RFRA is specifically designed, the federal language, to balance these competing interests. In fact, in communities that have passed local specific civil rights ordinances, as you weigh this person's religious interest versus the government interest, in communities that have passed a local civil rights ordinance, the government's interest on this side is weighed even more heavily because that ordinance has weight. That ordinance has meaning in this balancing test. We were very careful by following the federal statute not to eliminate any of those ordinances or not to try to force something statewide. Many of the states that have created, or a few of the states that have created these kinds of laws have created these big exemption schemes where there's this battle of exemptions. We're not doing any of that. All this bill does is creates a simple balancing test, the same one that protects us all from federal government intrusion and applies it to the state and local level. I have a couple things for you to see here. I won't spend a whole lot of time with these charts, but I do think they're very important. If you can see here to my left, the 4 prongs of the First Amendment. This highest level of protection is what's called strict scrutiny. It's a lawyerly word that says when you have a true constitutional right, you get full constitutional protections. We have that in Georgia for the freedom of assembly. We have it for the freedom of press. We have it for freedom of speech. After this 1997 ruling, though, this federalism ruling that said states have to write these laws themselves, the right to free exercise was diminished to a third-class right. It's called rational basis. If the government finds any rational reason to stomp on your rights, they can. That's been proven time and again. Again, our Republican Attorney General said in 2017 in a case, citizens don't have full constitutional protections for free exercise. He's simply stating the matter of the law. So what we have is, and what this bill does, is simply raise free exercise, which is here, to the same level of all other 4 prongs of the First Amendment. One other thing I'll show you before I step down, I'm going to remove this chart. This chart's very important for you to see. What you see here in dark green are all the areas that people have full protection, strict scrutiny level protection for their right to free exercise. Every state that touches Georgia, either by statute or by Supreme Court final holding, has full rights, has full strict scrutiny protection for their right of free exercise. In fact, inside of Georgia, you see these dots and you see these polygons, these funny-looking shapes. Those are our military bases. On every military base, people have full rights of free exercise. So if you live on a military base, you have this from state and local government services. You have protections. But regular Georgians don't. In fact, the dots you see here on this map are very important. You know what those dots are? Those are our state prisons. Both our federal and state prisons. If you're a convicted felon in a state prison, under the 2000 RLUIPA law, also signed by President Clinton, the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, RLUIPA, if you're in prison, you have full protection. You have full strict scrutiny level protection. You have full constitutional protections for your free exercise of your faith. But law-abiding Georgians and the rest of the state do not. Now, what kind of sense does that make? We're not trying to take anything from anybody. All we're simply doing with this bill is creating a balancing test that doesn't prejudge any case. Every case is weighed by the court on a case-by-case, fact-dependent basis so that every citizen in Georgia has the kind of protections that citizens around us have, that citizens in 35 states have, that citizens on our military bases have, and citizens that are convicted felons in our state and federal prisons have. That's all this bill does. This should be a simple cleanup bill. Unfortunately, nearly a decade ago, this was polarized nationally by very, very wealthy political activists. They were taking an issue on the tail end of the Obergefell case and trying to polarize this issue with Americans. They were certainly successful at doing that. They were successful at creating this bill, which was passed by an overwhelming bipartisan majority, signed by President Clinton, voted on by President and supported by State Senator Barack Obama, into something that became controversial a decade ago. All I'm asking you to do today is represent the rights of regular folks, in many cases religious minorities in our community, who depend on these basic protections. The kinds of things we're talking about here is Philemon Homes, a faith-based halfway house for prisoners, was allowed to continue offering its ministry after the local city council changed its zoning law and said they couldn't do what they did. Good Samaritan Arnold Abbott in Florida was arrested for serving meals to homeless people in a public park. The RFRA law in Florida allowed him to continue to serve these people. A devout Sikh captain, South Indian Sikh captain, was allowed to serve his country while wearing the articles of his faith, uncut hair, a beard, and a turban. Those are examples of how RFRA has been used. And the last one I will leave you with before we hear any of the discussion is Ms. Mary Steinmetz. She was a Jehovah's Witness. And as we look around here, there's not Jehovah's Witnesses pouring all over this Capitol. Again, this often protects people of relative religious minorities. But in 2010, 2011, Mary Steinmetz had been undergoing a health condition for her liver and was finally qualified for a liver transplant. She was a Medicaid recipient and was approved by Medicaid to have her liver transplant paid for. But the laws of Kansas at the time said that she had to get her services either in the state or no further than 50 miles outside the state. Now, Mary Steinmetz, being a Jehovah's Witness, refused blood transfusions. It's a religious belief that she holds, not one that I hold. Maybe people in this room do or don't hold that. It was hers, that she wouldn't take a blood transfusion. And the ability to get a liver transplant without a blood transfusion did not exist in Kansas, but it did exist in Nebraska. But the place in Nebraska that gave her the blood transfusion was more than 50 miles outside of the state lines of Kansas. Well, she appealed. to Kansas back before they had a Religious Freedom Restoration Act law with full constitutional protections, and they told her no. The government panel said, no, we've got our rules. You can get your transplant here. We don't recognize this issue you have with the blood transfusions. They told her no. Well, she fought it. It was a multi-year fight, and before they finally came around, after months and months and months and months and months of fighting, she was no longer eligible. Her medical condition had deteriorated to a point that she could no longer get a transplant, and she died. In late 2011, Ms. Mary Steinmetz died because the state's statute didn't provide full, strict scrutiny level of protection. Is there a compelling governmental interest for the government to be able to regulate the provision of health care? Absolutely. But is it the least restrictive means possible to say that we will pay for you out of state, but only 50 miles outside of our borders, not 150 miles outside of? There's not a compelling governmental interest when that runs into someone's sincerely held religious belief of not wanting to have a blood transfusion for an operation. That's exactly what RFRA does. It largely helps people of minority religious faiths, but it does apply to everybody, of course, to make sure the government has to prove a compelling reason, and in accomplishing the compelling reason, they do that in the least restrictive means possible. The decency, the human decency of allowing a Muslim woman who piously believes she needs to wear a full face garb in public, allowing her to have her photo for her driver's license made in a private room by a female photographer, the decency of that. The decency of allowing Mary Steinmetz to go more than 50 miles outside the borders of Kansas to have a transplant. That's what RFRA does. It simply makes the government pause and think, do we have a compelling interest in this? And if we do, are we accommodating the person's religious faith in every way we reasonably can? That's what Senate Bill 180 does. Nothing more, nothing less. I fear you may hear a parade of terribles after I leave the well today. I'll come back and speak to those. But that's what this bill does. And for that, I ask for your support for Senate Bill 180. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator is yielded. Recognize the senator from the 55th to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Senate. I rise today on my final crossover day to express my adamant opposition to Senate Bill 180, the so-called Religious Freedom Restoration Act. But more than that, I rise to express my disappointment that this body has found time again and again and again over the last 26 years that I've served to take up this legislation. No matter how many times it fails or dies in committee or the governor vetoes it, this body just keeps trying. And if it fails today, I guess you all will keep trying for years after I'm gone too. Everybody knows Democrats and Republicans have major disagreements. Everybody knows our parties have different priorities, and that's okay. And it's healthy for our democracy. But I do wonder if over all these years we could have made Georgia just a little bit better if instead of once again taking up unpopular legislation that has failed multiple times, what if we held a vote giving our impoverished students more funding to overcome their educational challenges? What if we spent our time protecting IVF treatments in Georgia, Family planning is under attack. But we're not rushing to put that on the Senate floor. And what if we voted this morning to expand Medicaid and give hundreds of thousands of Georgians access to quality health insurance? We've taken RFRA up multiple times in the last 14 years. In all that time, we never once voted on Medicaid expansion. I don't care what religion you are. You could be Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, or anyone else. Everybody needs to go to the doctor. Everybody of every faith gets sick. But nobody should suffer simply because they can't get health insurance. But not once during the last 14 years have we prioritized Medicaid expansion. Not one single time. Colleagues, Georgians expect for us to have different priorities, but they also expect for us to show common sense. And taking up RFRA yet again while leaving 400,000 Georgians or more behind shows that we are simply not using common sense. If we were, we wouldn't be voting on legislation that costs Georgia $1 billion in economic activity, $1 billion. We wouldn't be voting on legislation that legalizes, discriminates against the LGBTQ community and potentially other communities under the guise of religious freedom. We wouldn't vote on legislation that asks courts to determine who does and does not have sincere religious beliefs. None of this shows any common sense. As I've said in the past, if common sense was common, we'd all have some. Colleagues, this legislation makes Georgia a worse place to live. People want to be free to live their lives. They want to work and play in peace and not potentially encounter discrimination around every corner. But today, we are telling LGBTQ people and families to leave our state. Take your tax dollars and economic activity elsewhere. This just doesn't make good common sense. So once again, I spend my last crossover day, urging my colleagues to vote no on harmful legislation that we've already rejected multiple times. I sincerely hope and pray that future General Assemblies show a little bit more good judgment and good common sense. Mr. President, I've said my piece, and I yield the well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize the Senator from the 42nd. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator from the 14th. What purpose do you rise?
Motion, Mr. President.
You want a motion?
Motion to indefinitely postpone action on SBA 180.
So, got a motion and a second. Senator from the 51st, for what purpose do you rise?
I move the question.
That takes the question. All right. Move to question does take precedence over Senator from the 14th motion. So we will now be voting on the underlying bill. We'll vote on the motion of the previous question. All those in favor of the majority leader's motion will vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 33 and the nays are 18, and the majority leader's motion prevails. So now we've called the question, and we've got the minority report, and the senator from the 41st will deliver the minority report, and then we'll vote on the bill. Secretary, we read the minority report. We read the minority report. So, Secretary, Senator from the 41st, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to talk about a family with a little boy, 3 years old, left in the care of an Episcopal priest and a Muslim imam. A boy who was at risk of getting caught up in the foster care web, who came from living on the streets, a boy who rarely saw 3 square meals a day and who saw horrors unimaginable to us. A boy with the biggest smile and the brightest eyes. I rise today to talk about a family, a priest and an imam who have created a loving, stable home for a boy, who have taught him how to pick blueberries, how to take care of goats and chickens, how to show him the wonders of nature and the joys of playing with other kids. A family, a priest and an imam who are embracing parenthood to the fullest, who prayed and waited for years and years for a child to love. A family with a priest and an imam who also happen to be gay. This is my family. I am the priest, my wife is the imam. This is my story, and this is my reality and my fear. My fear that my child's daycare can turn us away, that a hotel can refuse me entry, that we can be denied access to any number of services that every other Georgian has rights to. The gas station that refuses us service, the restaurant that won't seat us, the physician who denies care for my child, all because they have a religious objection toward me and my family. Across the country, RFRAs have already opened the door for discrimination in public health, child welfare and adoptions, marriage-related services, employment, and public accommodations. Let's be clear. RFRA legislation is being used to discriminate against adults and children. This type of legislation has been used to bar LGBTQ children and children of different faith backgrounds who are in need of a home from certain foster care and adoption agencies. If we pass this bill, this could have a catastrophic impact on the lives of the over 11,000 children in Georgia who need loving homes that will meet their needs. This legislation has the devastating potential to keep our children on the streets without the life-saving resources that this body has worked tirelessly to provide for children in our state. RFRA legislation across the country has led to life and death situations being taken into the hands of those who feel that their religious beliefs should allow them the ability to decide the fates of others. Life and death situations, the lives of children who are living on the streets are cast aside. It's these lives that will be affected if we open the floodgates for discrimination. Legislation like this is an invitation. It's an invitation for Georgians to consider how they want to discriminate. It's a permission slip, a license, an open invitation to deprive Georgians of their basic needs, to deny the opportunity for children to have their lives saved, an opportunity to divide us deeply instead of unite us around our shared goals of creating a safer and more prosperous Georgia for all. But let's forget about my family for a minute. I want you to think about your own family. If any one of you has someone in your family or someone whom you love who is gay or in a multi-faith family or in an interracial relationship, if you have someone who you love who just has a whole lot of tattoos, for God's sake, if there is anyone who you love, when upon looking at them, people think that they are different than the norm, passing this legislation puts them at risk. This doesn't just affect my family. It doesn't just affect LGBTQ families. It affects yours. When it's your child or family member who's looking to adopt or needing medical care, who wants to marry the person that they love, or they're looking for a job or needing a hotel room. When it's your family member who simply needs a tow truck on the side of the road and they have a tag on the back of their car that makes someone think, I object to you. When it's your loved one that someone else has a religious objection to, there will be no protection for them. Let me say that again. When it's your loved one in the moment who needs a tow truck or a hotel room to stay in, there will be no protection for them. Maybe it gets resolved 2 years later in a court, but in that moment, at that night, while they are standing on the side of the road, wishing and praying that someone will give them a tow, they have no protection. And they don't have any protection because we are one of only 3 states in the nation that doesn't have an anti-discrimination law. We don't have protections set in place if people try to abuse this RFRA legislation. So friends, let's not wait until it's too late for our loved ones. Let's not wait until the bill is already passed and the floodgates of discrimination have been opened. We have a chance today, right now, to care for the lives of Georgians, the lives of countless children, the lives of our loved ones. Like my little boy who is at home joyfully playing, feeling safe for the first time in his life. You have a chance to vote down this bill, not because of your personal religious beliefs, but because the people of this state are depending on you to help them survive and thrive. Friends, know this. If you vote green today, this is a vote against my family and yours. A green vote is a vote against Georgians. It's a vote against our families, our children, and our loved ones. So I urge you, dear colleagues, to stand with me in protecting all Georgians by voting no today. With that, Mr. President, I yield the well.
Senator has yielded. All right, Senator, the question was called, and so debate is closed. We've got the minority report that the senator from the 41st delivered, and the author of the bill now has a few minutes to close the final debate.
Ladies and gentlemen from the Senate, my friend from the cab, lady from the 41st, appreciate the impassioned. I don't need that. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Yeah, we're gonna keep this short. Appreciate the staff here. Appreciate the impassioned plea. This is an issue that matters. This is something that really matters. That's why this is before us. You know, I think we're in a place where what's before you today in Senate Bill 180 represents what the lady from the 55th said as common sense. You know, is one of the Wesley brothers said once, although we may not think alike, perhaps we may love alike. I think it's important for us to recognize that things that deeply matter to people are worthy of being before this body, and what we bring before you today is something that deeply matters. For deeply held religious beliefs, not invidious discrimination, that's what this bill's about. This is about a common sense approach to create a balancing test that recognizes the very difficult circumstances individuals find themselves in as we weave together these rights, these interests of differing people. How do we do that in a free and fair way where the government can perform its duties, but do it in a way that has the delicacy and the thoughtfulness that this balancing test demands? That the government can fulfill its needs, but it does it in the least restrictive means possible. Only the things that absolutely has to do to accommodate someone's religious belief in a way that's delicate, thoughtful, and just. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I encourage your support for Senate Bill 180 today because it passes the common sense test. We could spend time going case by case by case by case. One of the things that was raised by the lady from the 41st, it was ruled on behalf of an agency, a Catholic charity, by a 9-0 opinion by the United States Supreme Court. Not a state court, but a 9-0 opinion by the United States Supreme Court that a Catholic adoption agency has certain independence. But RFRA doesn't prejudge any of these cases. There is no standard that it's applied across the board other than this fair balancing test, applied delicately and thoughtfully to every case based on the facts of each specific case. That's what this Senate Bill 180 does. And with that, I would humbly and ask in a bipartisan way for your support for Senate Bill 180. Mr. President, I yield the will.
Senators, close debate. Senator from the 6th, you have your light on. Do you have a parliamentary inquiry? Okay, you wave. All right, the question has been called. It is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the 41st, what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Senator, isn't it true that this balancing test will only be enacted many years after the harm has already happened when someone's been denied their accommodations?
Senator is passionate about what she speaks. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 33 and the nays are 19. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. I recognize the senator from the 27th.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that Senate Resolution 189 be lifted from the table.
The senator has requested that Senate Resolution 189 be taken from the table. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Resolution 189 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th. A resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution so as to provide that the General Assembly may by general law authorize local boards of education to impose, levy, and collect development impact fees and use those proceeds to pay for a share of the cost of additional educational facilities and for other purposes. Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others offered the following Amendment 1 to amend Senate Resolution 189 by inserting subject to local referendum after fees on lines 3 and 26, by inserting condition upon approval by a majority of the qualified voters residing within the limits of the local taxing jurisdiction voting in a referendum thereon after development on line 13. Additionally, Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others offered the following Amendment 2 to amend Senate Resolution 189 by inserting subject to local referendum after fees on lines 3 and 26, by inserting condition upon approval by a majority of the qualified voters residing within the limits of the local school system voting in a referendum thereon after development on line 13. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to the motion for the senator from the 27th? Hearing none, I recognize the senator from the 27th to speak to the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. I believe that I may be standing between you and dinner, so I will try to make this quick. Senate resolution is a constitutional amendment that will be supported by an enabling piece of legislation that I will bring next that endeavors to add schools to our existing impact fee ordinance. I'm going to take about 3 minutes and tell you about our existing ordinance, and then I'll tell you what the enabling legislation does as well. Currently, Georgia law for the last number of decades, about 35 years, has allowed for municipalities to levy impact fees on new development for parks, roads, libraries, and public safety. They've not been allowed to be levied for schools. And I believe that schools are an important piece of infrastructure that place a significant demand on the taxpayers of a municipality when a municipality is growing quickly. The impact fee statute currently requires that a municipality implement a capital improvement plan. They can only be used for system improvements. The plan needs to be approved by DCA. The new development can only pay by statute its pro rata share of new growth. Payers need to be credited for any system improvements they make as part of a zoning condition. If they're not used for the purpose collected in the area collected within 6 years, they need to be refunded to the payer. You need to have a committee established to study this and recommend the amount of the fees that needs to be made up of at least 50% of people from the development or real estate industries. In other words, this is about the most fair form of revenue collection that the state has. It is directly tied to the activity that takes place. It is refunded if not used for the purpose collected. It has incredible guardrails around the uses. And this enabling legislation would allow voters in the state of Georgia to allow for the collection of impact fees. Now, what the enabling legislation will do is it will limit that to fast-growing counties in the state of Georgia. We define fast-growing counties as counties who have a student population, I should say fast-growing school systems, excuse me. School systems that have shown 20% growth over the last 10 years and have had $250 million of capital expenditures over that same period of time. There's an amendment before you. There's actually 2 amendments before you that are identical. So I'm going to ask to withdraw one at the appropriate time, Mr. President. But what this does is it places an additional condition on the approval of this to a majority vote of voters in a school system. And we will have similar language that you will see in the CA. As we've talked to some of our colleagues in the House, they wanted to have an additional step where voters would not only vote for this as part of a constitutional amendment, but then before they could be implemented locally, it would be on the local referendum as well. So with that, Mr. President, I'm happy to answer any questions, and if there are none, I'm happy to yield the well as well.
You do have a few questions, Senator. I recognize the senator from the second.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
I do.
Senator, would this impact fee ordinance going on the ballot allow for relief, especially for our seniors who bear the brunt of paying the increase in property taxes for school districts when there's a fast growth in the community, and this would then shift that responsibility back to the private entities so that those seniors don't have this undue burden? Is that not true?
I certainly think that can happen, Senator. You'll see language in the next piece of legislation that comes that the Impact Fee Committee can speak to what taxes should be lowered as a result of that, and one of those is property taxes. Another one of those that could be lowered by this revenue stream is e-sploss as well.
I recognize the senator from the 47th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the senator yield?
I do.
When you talk about impact fees that are paid and they're going to a school that doesn't get built within that 6-year time period, what's going to happen with that money? Because I understand it that, you know, we live in a mobile society. People move into a community. They're, okay, here we go. They've moved out. You said the money's going to return back to the taxpayers.
So if not encumbered within 6 years, the entity has to inform the person that it pays, to the developer, that that money has not been used for the purpose it was collected. The developer then has up to 1 year to request a refund, and the Board of Education in this place will be compelled to provide that refund.
So it's actually going back to the particular developer?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Not to anybody else?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Maybe buying into that development or something along those lines?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. President, if no further questions, I will yield the well.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator from the 31st, would you like to speak to the bill?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be just very brief. I do want to thank the senator from the 27th for bringing this bill forward. I think some of us that represent a few counties, such as Forsyth, I represent Paulding County, have seen tremendous growth in our communities. I think the senator from the 27th has seen, and his colleagues up in that part of the state, pretty exponential growth. I know in our county it's 10%. But even 10% is creating overcrowding, it's creating large classrooms, and in being in a low wealth district, very difficult to just even raise enough e-sploss to basically pay for capital projects, knowing that middle school, for example, that we're about to open, I know next school year is $80 million, $80 to $90 million in some cases, where the total e-sploss that we would collect over 5 years is somewhere between 120 and 130. So if we're seeing 10% growth, you know, or more, I think it puts us at a very significant disadvantage, but also it's putting the burden, unfortunately, on our taxpayers in Paulding County to pay crazy tax rates. And I know that's a separate conversation, and I appreciate those that have been addressing it. But hopeful in the future that this legislation will include counties such as ours that have seen that kind of 10% or more growth. So I'm voting in favor of this bill. I think it's important for some of our communities. I think this form of fee is no different than public safety or other things that we may see back home that is charged. And again, hope for favorable consideration that see this bill passed to support the enormous population growth that we're seeing in many counties across the state. Thank you, Mr. President.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Senator from the 27th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that for unanimous consent that amendment number 2 be withdrawn.
Senator has asked that amendment number 2 be withdrawn. Is there objection? No objection. Amendment 2 is withdrawn. Any other senator object to the question being called? Chair hears none. Question is on the adoption of Amendment 1 by the senator from the 27th. Is there objection on Amendment 1? Without objection, Amendment 1 is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of committee which is favorable to adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the resolution as amended. All those in favor of the resolution will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the adoption of the resolution as amended, the yeas are 49 and nays are 2. This resolution, having received the requisite 2/3 constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Senator from the 27th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that Senate Bill 208 be lifted from the table.
Senator has asked that Senate Bill 208 be taken off the table. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 208, a bill by Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 71 of Title 36 of the OCGA relating to development impact fees, so as to provide for development impact fees for education and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Education and Youth recommends that this do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Dixon of the 45th District Chairman. Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others offered the following amendment to amend Senate Bill 208 by replacing lines 77 through 80 with the following. G, before adopting a resolution to impose, levy, and collect educational development impact fees as provided in this article, the local board of education shall require a local referendum and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, I recognize Senator from the 27th to speak to the bill and the amendment.
Thank you, colleagues, for your vote on that last measure. This is the enabling legislation. Mr. President, I'm happy to answer any questions, and if there are none, I will yield the will.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objections to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. We have the amendment number 1, authored by the senators from the 27th. Is there objection to amendment number 1? Without objection, amendment number 1 is added. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Question is on the passage of the bill as amended. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. All right. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 49, the nays are 2. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed as amended. Okay, so we're going to take, we're actually running ahead of schedule right now, so believe it or not, we're running ahead of schedule. So we might be able to get a couple bills on that we didn't think we were going to get on here earlier. But the pro tem senator from the 26th, I don't want to deny you any food tonight. The pro tem's got you a nice meal planned, so we're going to break for dinner right now, and we'll come right back. Well, you don't ever have to worry about that, Senator. So, all right, let's stand in recess. We'll come back in about 7:30.